Hello everybody, it's Warhammer here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around we are on Shimmer's Ward, playing as the Tomb Kings against the Empire, who has brought a very gimmicky build, as you can probably already tell, from good old Barfazar, the Witch Hunters, and the Templehof Luminark. So very gimmicky, very brutal build sort of on the field here, and we'll see how things work out. So for the Tomb Kings, a very infantry-heavy core, similar to the anti-Dark Elf roster. I decided to go infantry heavy. I do think against Empire it's actually the way to go. Empire has a lot of good counters to monsters. They've got thunderers. They've got not thunderers. They've got handgunners. They've got cannons. They've got demigriffs with halberds. They can bring Karl Franz, who's honestly not bad at sniping out constructs. They can bring halberds. They've got a lot of tools to deal with constructs. So I think that shooting is the way to go, and shooting and infantry is the way to go. So regardless, going through my comp, once again we are centered on a Tomb King. If I go infantry heavy, Tomb King is basically always the way to go. It might seem odd because it's not Cetra, who does have the Lord of Nakara, which is ostensibly good for supporting infantry, but I found that the heal that it procs is just not that good. It's not really worth it in my opinion, especially now that Realm of Souls has been buffed, and I generally find that I'm better off just bringing Tomb King and getting the benefit of the Amulet of Fasta, which is just such a potent debuff. Minus 48 missile parry, minus 30 armor. You can use it to either break enemy armor or make your archers just that much more effective, maybe even both. We do have the Lich Priest of Death here, who does have Fate of Buna, Soul Blight, and Spirit Leech, as well as, of course, the Nefera Scrolls of Might Incantation, so providing a whole bunch of damage as well as debuffs to once again make the archers more potent, because there's so much non-AP in this army that you really need to be making the most of your armor debuffs. You need to get as much of your opponent's armor sundered as possible, get an edge early on, and then work it out into the later stages of the game, either by waiting on your cooldowns or just overwhelming your opponent with numbers. My Tomb Prince here coming in with Blade of Setep, another minus 30 armor, minus 22% physical resist, very potent debuff. He's of course anti-large armor piercing. Bonus first large, I think 25, so very solid. He can do a lot of damage to Demigriff Knights or Reich's Guardians like that. Curse of Jeff, Tomb Strike, and Guardian, so some very potent buffs there. The front line, bunch of Tomb Guard and the Kepler Guard anchoring things in the center. Of course, these guys will trade really well with most Empire infantry, except Greatswords. Greatswords will kind of dumpster Tomb Guard. Unfortunately for my opponent, he did not bring any Greatswords, so I was definitely feeling that I was a bit lucky in this game. I was definitely feeling a bit fortunate that my opponent didn't bring a lot of Greatswords, because otherwise you definitely need to be using your debuffs on them and definitely need to be using those archers to bring them down. Greatswords, if you're playing as Empire, Greatswords are a great pick against Tomb Kings. They'll beat all their infantry really effectively, and they tend to hold pretty well as well. For the rest of the army, we do have some Tomb Guard with halberds on the periphery, spearmen in the back. So Empire Heavy Cav, a huge threat. Now, granted, my opponent here only brought Demigriffs. In my opinion, if you're going against Tomb Kings, it's often best to bring some Reichsguard or just Empire Knights. Get in the back line. You can really crush their shooting, and so you definitely want these Tomb Guard halberds with their AP, anti-large, and decent melee defense, and they're backed by these Skeleton Spears just to provide some extra chaff and extra meat. Now, and then of course the firing line in the center here, 2 Skeleton Archers and plus Legion of Demonetization. So nothing too fancy there. These guys, of course, will melt, hopefully, my opponent's troops pretty efficiently. For my opponent's build, as we discussed already, a bit gimmicky, and when I say a bit, it's more than a bit gimmicky. Heroes enough, my opponent did bring Baltasar Gelt, who does have Gehenna's Golden Hounds, which is a little surprising. Searing Doom, not bad against light infantry, like Tomb Kings tend to bring, and Final Transmutation, so this is really where the gimmicks happen. Very expensive spell, but potentially great for sniping out lords, and my opponent obviously came with that in mind. He did bring 2 Witch Hunters, both with Accusation, looking probably to snipe out my lords. He also did bring the Templehof Luminark, which has a net, which has its great damage per hit, and of course Tomb King's troops are vulnerable to fire damage. If you look, you can see the caster is actually not vulnerable to fire, which is a little surprising, but both the Lord and the Tomb Prince have a fire vulnerability, so big problem there against the Templehof Luminark. And of course it bypasses physical resist and all that sort of stuff, so it's really strong. So deciding I'm not going to be a fool, I simply march forward with my infantry. There's no reason to give the Templehof Luminark good shots on my lords. For the front line, my opponent went very cheap, some swordsmen, Sigmar Sons, and Tattersouls. Unfortunately, the way they're distributed, he's got way too much, in my opinion, Unbreakable on this flank. It would have been better to more evenly distribute the Unbreakable units, so if a section of his front line gave way, he'd be able to, it wouldn't just collapse an entire flank. I think probably putting Tattersouls here instead of the swordsmen would be better deployment there. Demigriff Knights, Royal of Griffites, so great anti-large contingent. Single unit of handguns, just provide some point defense with AP. 2 spears to tie down cavalry that might be trying to disrupt. Now, my opponent decides to simply start teeing off on the Kepler Guard. Takes 11 models off there with the Temple of Luminark, so getting some value early on. It's doing some good work. You can see it's taking off about 800 HP, and definitely not good for me. This is an elite, very elite unit. It costs 1,000 gold, so he's getting some value in there. And the Temple of Luminark will get 2 or 3 shots before they can close the distance. You can see another shot going in, another 6 models down, and actually took off a member of the Blessed Legion of Demonetization there. But we are pushing forward slowly but surely. Now, big mistake here. I start feeding in. Now I do start moving here as my opponent starts casting a bombardment. Bit of a mistake there, overcasting in my opinion. Really should have waited until I was actually stopped the fire in my opinion, but regardless, we do lose another archer, but I'm simply at this point pushing forward. My opponent, you can see, moving his witch hunters up. You can see the tomb guard there getting pulverized. The Kepler Guard already down 43 for almost, oh never mind, about 33 models, but regardless, quite a bit. Handgun fire coming in, witch hunters pouring in the hate, and you guys really having a bad day. And here's where I'm making a bit of a mistake. You can see I'm actually looping around while my opponent's focused on my archers. I'm actually using my Kepler Guard here with his Luminark. I'm actually pushing forward with the Kepler Guard, and you can see they're getting picked apart. The losing model after model to those annoying witch hunters. So my opponent getting huge value there. And of course, I'm not going to use my archers on that. But regardless, we are going to get all our archers online and start pecking away at the handguns, who of course are not built to sustain this sort of bombardment. And they immediately start losing models. They're going to start routing and fleeing. Now, big mistake here. I kept all my polearms in the back. I forgot about them. I pushed my archers forward, pushed my heroes forward, and then promptly forgot about all these troops, which is really bad because my opponent is now going to be able to flank me with his cavalry. By the time I realized it, it was more than a little too late. Now my opponent here does sort of try to support the front line. You can see he is trying to now shifting fire on the Temple of Luminark. I'm not paying attention with the Tomb King, and he gets clocked for over half his HP in a single hit, immediately taking him to critical binding. Just brutal sort of hit there, brutal stuff from the Temple of Luminark. Unfortunately, the handguns have been zoned off. And now the archers are going to be able to come online and start dishing out the hurt. The Temple of Luminark, of course, does not have a lot of armor at all. It's a pretty big, bulky target. And the archers are going to start chipping away and taking it down. In the front line, you can see the Kepler Guard, despite getting mauled so badly, it's up to over 30 kills, getting those heals coming in from the Realm of Souls, the first proc, and this actually does a decent amount of healing now. My opponent here does get in with his relative grip fights. I do hit him with an Amulet Fasta, come in with the Tomb Prince, and now pull back my Tomb King. Definitely a little risky because these guys are, of course, anti-large and really high-end anti-large. But I figured I need to do something. My opponent here raining death and destruction on my Blessed Legion, and I just can't afford to have all my archers here destroyed before the Temple of Luminark goes down. But you can see the Kepler Guard has actually not only lost 1 model in the past time, they're actually doing really well. Between the regen and the heals from the Realm of Souls, they're having a really field day there. And you can see my opponent's line is largely broken. Now the Witch Hunters here tied down in melee. Spearmen aren't going to hold too hot. Temple of Luminark here, oddly enough, getting a shot as it's moving. I don't know why that is. Probably because of the cast time. I'm not entirely sure. Regardless, the shot misses. Takes down quite a few Tomb Guard there. You can see it's up to 58 kills actually. But you know what? It's basically a goner. We hit it with a Spirit Leech. I have no intention of letting it come back. The Lich Priest is hot and stale and is going to force it off. Looking at the map now, you can see definitely this mistake cost me dearly. Losing almost 2 entire units of archers to Demigryph Knights could have been easily avoided. Big mistake there on my part. You can see the Tomb King able to zone off the Dwelleth Griffites. I hit him with a Blade of Setep, debuffing their stats a whole bunch, and we were able to sort of force them off. And now, at this point, the front line is kind of degenerated. There's Tomb Guard tied down here fighting the Tattersouls. I do believe the Tomb Guard wins out in the long run. Definitely. 77 kills to 45, but definitely doing well. Over here, handguns pouring into my Lich Priest, but you know, he's got rid of the Temple of Luminark. It's literally just vaporized. So now I'm just pulling the caster back, going after the handguns, just trying to shut them down. My opponent flanking around, but you can see the Kepler Guard, 29 kills, doing okay. And we actually do get the final proc on Realm of Souls, so we are able to summon some Mushapti. Kepler Guard, 61 kills, despite how badly things started for him. So Mushapti come in, you can see over here the Lich Priest getting in on the handguns, doing quite a bit of work with the Tomb Prince. And in the meantime, my opponent, realizing that I'm focusing his Royal Darker Fights off the field, is trying to come back and save their bacon with good old Geltman. But I hit Gelt with Spirit Leech and ignore him with my Tomb King. I just want to get these Demigryphs off the field. They still have a lot of models. 7 models and 1300 HP is no laughing matter, so I really don't want them coming back. Looking at a sort of overarching view of the field at this point, my opponent down to 7 Demigryphs and almost no HP here. The front line at this point is basically buckled, and I still have several healthy units of Tomb Guard here, which just speaks disaster. As we've discussed, the Tattersouls do lose the Tomb Guard. This actually shows these guys are pretty comparable cost-wise. Sigmar's Sons, 700 gold the 750 on the Tomb Guard. Tattersouls or what? What are Tattersouls? They're over 800, I think, and they're getting completely dumpstered here by the Tomb Guard. So definitely some bad trade-offs for my opponent. Over on the other flank, I'm going to be able to rout off the Griffites off the field and then probably turn around. And the thing is, once Skeleton runs out of charge bonus, he's in for a bad time. We hit Tomb Strike and then start clocking him in the face. And my opponent's army at this point actually suffers army losses and routs. So really bad day for the Gelt man. You can see he just routes off there. And except for my opponent's unbreakable units, it is a GG, and you can see we're just doing a little bit of mop up at this point, clean up in aisle 9. My opponent does decide to leave the game. So going over the build, I think obviously I do think the shooting is the way to go against Empire. Now I'm not entirely sure if you want to go with this many Tomb Guard. I think that potentially one of the alternatives, you can try to get some Ushabti Great Bows in there to provide you with some anti-large support. Definitely one thing I'd consider doing is dropping one of these Tomb Guard and then getting an extra unit of archers and an extra unit of spears just to get wider coverage on the back line. But nonetheless, it's a competitive build. Your Tomb Guard with halberds, great AP, great anti-large. The spearmen can bog enemy cav down. Tomb Guard, well, good against all Empire infantry, gets up great swords, and even there they'll do okay. They'll do something. Skeleton archers, Blessed Legion, all did okay. It's important to keep in mind they've almost killed the Temple off Luminark, and they really mauled the handguns, which in and of itself they paid for themselves right there, which is important. As for my opponent's build, very gimmicky. One of the things to keep in mind, these builds tend to work if your opponent plays along or plays into it. A lot of times what I see, people think they have to get their lord into the fight. They think they have to get their heroes in there. They've got to stick with the army. Oftentimes I do see players who charge into these sorts of builds with their heroes, with their lords, and then promptly lose their heroes and their lords. And that snowballs into disaster. Don't do that. If you see your opponent went with a super gimmicky build like this one, understand these guys are not gonna these 4 units are not going to do all that much to your infantry. If you just push in with this sort of mob of troops, your opponent's invested like 1,700 to 2,000 probably, so 3,700. Balthazar Gelt's probably another 1,500 at least. I don't. Your opponent's invested like over 5k. He's probably invested about as much as you have into your heroes, into units that are not really good against all your other troops. They're very specific against these sorts of heroes, for this sort of hero sniping. And so just push in with your normal troops, tie them down, muck them up, block them, zone them off. Make sure the witch hunters can't get their Cats of Spirit of Accusation off. Balthazar Gelt can't get Final Transmutation off by zoning them off if you need to. Then bring your heroes in. Once your opponent's preoccupied, once they're tied down, that's when you can commit and really win the day. Otherwise, yeah, this build. If you're going gimmicky, I don't really know how to make this build much more competitive. I would recommend bringing greatswords instead of Sigmar Sons and Tattersouls. Honestly, they'll trade a lot better. Like for example, when I did my artillery build with Empire, I brought greatswords for the front line, not unbreakable units like this, because greatsword just trades so well, in my opinion, with Tomb Guard or with Tomb King units. But regardless, gonna get to my opponent's Sun Tzu here. Fun build to play against, fun build to see, of course. If you guys enjoyed the video, if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, anything like that, be sure to share them, and I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.